Before the first word was carved into stone, before the first myth was whispered across the fire, there were nights. Long, dark, endless nights where the stars wheeled overhead and the earth held its breath. There were no names yet, no gods with faces, no kingdoms to defend or destroy. Only the hush of the wind, the crackle of fire, the deep ache of hunger, and the strange, flickering visions that came to people when their eyes closed. They lay on furs or on the dirt itself, their bodies still but their minds wandering somewhere far beyond the reach of sound. In those moments, those vulnerable hours between the last flame and the first bird song, something ancient stirred behind their closed lids. Shapes without form, voices without language, colors that had no name. Dreams were not just illusions to them. Dreams were real, perhaps more real than anything daylight could offer. In dreams the dead returned. The animals spoke. The sky fell and rose again. The self unraveled and became wind or beast or rain. A child would wake and not cry because the thing they had seen was too big for fear. A hunter would rise with the memory of walking beside a giant elk, not as predator but as kin. An old woman, bones brittle and eyes fogged, would mutter in her sleep, and the others would listen closely, not to comfort her, but to understand what else might be speaking through her. They didn't have stories. They had echoes. And those echoes carried truth. Some of them began to mark the places where their dreams crossed with waking life. A spiral etched into rock where the serpent of the night coiled. A line of red pigment across the cave wall where a figure had walked in silence. These were not meant to be read. They were meant to be remembered. Not everyone could dream in this way, they believed. Some were chosen. Some wandered farther than others in the world behind their eyes. They were not priests. There were no priests. Only dreamers who returned with something strange clinging to their skin like smoke or snow. The dreams often began with the sky. The sky was not silent in those days. It groaned, whispered, flashed. The stars moved not in fixed constellations, but as living beings that drifted, danced, or fell. One night a man dreamed that the moon opened like an eye. He woke and found that the animals had vanished from the valley. Another dreamed of a hole in the sun, and soon after, a sickness spread through the clan, soft and slow like rot under bark. They saw patterns, and patterns became power. Not to control but to align with. Each season brought different dreams. In the spring, the earth spoke in floods and roots. In the summer, fire walked through their minds, leaving behind faces of those not yet born. In autumn, bones danced under the ground, whispering secrets. And in winter, the dreams grew quiet, deep, cold. That was when the oldest stories came. The ones that had no beginning. The ones that circled back on themselves like snakes swallowing their own tails. They feared the dark, but they also craved it. For it was only in the dark that they could meet the others. The ones who lived beneath time. Ancestors, yes, but also strangers. Things without names that showed them things they had no words for. Once a girl dreamed of stone that bled. She painted it with crushed berries, and when she died, her bones were buried beneath that wall. Years later, others who knew nothing of her still dreamed the same bleeding stone. They added their marks beside hers. A growing language made of dreams. Not spoken, not written, but felt. And somewhere far away, where the land was flatter and the stars were fewer, another group sat by a fire and told no stories at all. They simply listened. For the crackling of fire was enough. The fire carried the voices of the night. And when sleep came, they let themselves fall backward into it, like stepping off a cliff with trust, knowing the dark would catch them. There was a time when the line between sleeping and waking was not so clear, when the twilight between both states lasted longer, lingered deeper, and in that gray hush people did not ask whether they were dreaming or not. They simply accepted what they saw. To them, the veil between the worlds was not something to be torn down or lifted, but something soft and familiar, like a mist that clung to the skin before sunrise. In this space, time moved strangely. You could live a lifetime in the dream and return to your body with the faint taste of fire on your tongue and the sound of distant rivers in your ears. Children were the first to cross easily. They spoke of people no one had ever seen, of lands not yet found, of animals with eyes that watched them in silence. These were not dismissed. The clan listened. Sometimes they would repeat the child's words around the fire, not to explain them but to hold them, to weigh them, to let them echo. And when the same dream came again to another child, or an elder or a hunter lost in snow, they knew it was not coincidence. It was visitation. The dream had chosen to return. Their sleeping places became sacred not because they built temples, but because the ground itself remembered. A smooth patch of stone, warmed by body after body, where the dreams came more quickly. A hollow in the roots of an ancient tree, where sleep wrapped around you like a living thing. They did not understand sleep as escape. They saw it as a journey inward and downward toward something larger, older, more complete. They didn't call it a soul. They had no such word. But they knew they were not just flesh and breath. They knew something watched through them. Something that waited only for silence. There were those who walked in sleep, not with arms stretched blindly like ghosts from a later time, but with slow purpose as if guided. They would rise in the dead of night and walk into the woods or the hills, barefoot and silent. And when they returned, their eyes wide and dazed, they would say little. Only a gesture, a grunt, a fragment of sound that meant nothing in everything. Sometimes they carried objects. A smooth stone, a bird's feather, a handful of ash. They did not remember where they'd gone. But the dream remembered them. They painted not to decorate but to recall. The walls of their caves, soaked with ochre and smoke, became a second skin for their dreams. A bison with too many legs, a figure half woman half serpent, a handprint left over and over again as if pressing the past into permanence. These images were not stories. They were portals. To look at them was to enter the moment of dreaming again. To touch them was to ask the dream to return. Sometimes it did. They believed some dreams came from beneath the earth. In winter, when the cold pushed them deeper into the caves, they said the dreams grew stronger. They came up through the stone like breath rising from deep lungs. These were slower dreams, heavier, filled with bones and fire and eyes that did not blink. In them they saw themselves not as they were, but as they had been and might yet be. Sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes both. The dream did not care for form. And when sickness came, when one of them faded like a shadow at dusk, the dreams changed. They grew urgent, sharp, full of movement and sound. The clan would stay awake longer, watching the fire, murmuring to each other not in fear but in readiness. For the dream was calling one of them home. And when that person finally closed their eyes, the others did not weep. They listened. If they heard breath continue after death, they knew the journey was still underway. If silence came too quickly, they touched the chest, the forehead, and whispered to the spirit to walk gently. Some believed that all of life was one long dream of the earth, and that when they died they awoke not elsewhere, but deeper into a place without hunger, without cold, where the stars themselves whispered stories they would never forget. Others said no. The dreams were the real life, and waking was only a distraction. But they did not argue. There was no need to agree. The dream was different for each and yet somehow the same. They trusted that. And so, before history began, before kings and wars and writing and records, people slept. They slept beside rivers, in trees, in caves and grass huts and on open plains. But their sleep was not empty. It was full of journeys, of meetings, of unnameable truths passed between souls like smoke through fingers. And as the stars wheeled slowly above, they dreamed not of conquest, not of gold or power, but of lightless forests, of great beasts, of faces they had never seen yet somehow loved, and of songs that had no words but still made their hearts ache. Sometimes the dreams came not to individuals but to many at once. A whole clan would wake trembling, each describing the same forest filled with fire, or the same figure standing beneath a black sun. They would sit in silence, not afraid but humbled, understanding that the dream had spoken across many minds as one. These collective visions shaped their migrations, their rituals, their choices of where to plant their camps or when to move. They did not call it prophecy. They had no need to name it. It was simply part of being alive. When a child was born, they believed the dream world opened slightly wider to let the soul pass through. 4 days, the baby would sleep almost constantly, and the elders would watch over it with reverence. What dreams did the infant carry from the other side? What memories were being shed, what new ones taken on? Sometimes the child would laugh or weep in sleep, and the women would nod to each other. It was said those first dreams were echoes of the place from which all life came and would return. Not heaven, not a paradise, but a silence that sang. There were those who refused to dream or who claimed they could not. Some feared sleep, afraid of what might come. They became watchers, guardians of the night. While others rested, they stared into the dark, listening. And sometimes those very people, the ones who resisted, were the ones who received the strongest visions. Not while asleep, but while still and silent beside the fire. Dreaming while awake was rare, and those touched by it often changed. They spoke less. They wandered more. Some left entirely, walking into the unknown with only the stars for company. It was not seen as madness. It was seen as calling. Long before the gods had names, before temples were raised or prayers spoken aloud, dreams were the first language of the divine. Not commandments carved in stone, but flickers of meaning that danced at the edge of thought. In sleep, a woman would learn that a river was no longer safe. In sleep, a boy would be given a melody that, when hummed, soothed the dying. In sleep, the shape of fire would show a man how to make it without lightning. And in all of this, no one claimed credit. The dream had chosen, and that was enough. The memory of these dreams did not fade with morning. They were shared around the fire like food, handled with care. Some were told over and over, passed from mouth to ear, until the image wore smooth like a stone in a stream. Others were kept secret, buried in the heart like coals. A few were never spoken at all, too strange or sacred to voice. These were kept in the body itself, hidden behind the eyes, perhaps waiting for the right person to understand them later. And not all dreams were kind. Just as the waking world held danger, so did the land behind sleep. There were dreams that clawed, that burned, that left bruises on the soul. These were not always feared. Sometimes they were embraced. A hunter who dreamt of being hunted would change his ways. A woman who saw herself drowning might lead the tribe away from the rising river. Pain, too, had a place in the language of dreams. It was not punishment. It was instruction. Across generations, these dreams became the first maps, not of places but of meaning. A mountain might be sacred not because it towered above them, but because 3 women over 3 seasons all dreamed of a silver bird nesting there. A cave might become taboo after a boy emerged pale and wordless, refusing to sleep again. Their world was not divided between real and unreal. The dream shaped the land as much as wind or water. Eventually, as generations passed, people began to speak more, to tell longer stories, to give names to the things that once had none. They named the stars, the rivers, the wind. They carved their marks deeper into stone, added symbols to the walls, created patterns. But even as language grew, the oldest among them remembered that before there were words, there was the dream. And they warned the young not to trust speech too much. For a word could lie, but a dream never did. It only showed, and it was up to the soul to understand. Far from the places where cities would one day rise, where time would be counted and laws written, people still gathered at night beneath the open sky. They lay in silence, the fire low, and let their minds fall into that other place, that deep place, that endless place without borders. They did not call it history. They did not need to. They only knew that when they returned, something within them was slightly changed, sharpened, softened, or opened in some quiet, invisible way. And the world turned on, slow and dark, carrying its dreamers through night after night. They began to mark time not just by the passage of the sun or the cycles of the moon, but by the dreams that came in seasons. There were dreams of the rains, which arrived in low tones and heavy colors, dreams of firelight flickering on stone even before the first lightning sparked it into being. The elders said that the earth itself dreamed, and they could feel it breathing when they pressed their palms to the soil. They said mountains dreamed in centuries, trees in decades, rivers in tides and flood. And when people slept beside these dreaming beings, the boundary between mind and matter dissolved just enough to feel something ancient whispering beneath the bones of the world. Even the animals were believed to dream, and their dreams were respected. If a fox lingered near a camp and stared into the eyes of a sleeping child, the tribe would not hunt foxes that season. They watched the movements of birds more closely after the women began dreaming of feathers falling like snow. Once, when an elder dreamed of wolves walking on two legs and speaking in low, mournful tones, the next day the men who went hunting found no game and returned empty. They took it as a sign that the spirits of the animals had turned away. Something needed to be made right. So they fasted. They sang. They slept again, asking for forgiveness in the only language they knew. The power of the dreamers grew not because they sought it, but because the others began to gather around those whose sleep reached the deepest. A young boy who could dream of distant fires before they were seen on the horizon, or an old woman who knew when rain would come based on a shadow in her dream, would be treated with quiet reverence. Not as leaders, not as rulers, but as guides, vessels through which the unseen made itself faintly known. These dreamers rarely claimed their visions as truth. They simply shared what they had seen. The tribe would listen, weigh, and decide. There was no dogma, no command. Only the slow unfolding of belief born from listening. It was said that when one person dreamed of another, that bond could never fully be broken. They had met in a place more real than waking, and from then on, something invisible yet strong held them together. If a man dreamed of a woman's laughter echoing in a cave he had never seen, and years later found her standing before that same cave, no one questioned it. This was not fate. This was the dream pulling them both toward a story still being told. And in those stories there were no heroes, no villains. Only travelers through night. Sometimes a person would stop dreaming altogether. This was feared not because they were cursed, but because they were drifting too far from the invisible thread that tied the living to the deep. The clan would gather and surround them with songs, food, the scent of herbs burning. They would be watched as they slept to make sure the dream could find its way back. And when it did, when the sleeper finally stirred and whispered, "I saw the shadow again, but now it was weeping," the tribe would sigh with relief. The thread held. There were those rare and dangerous moments when a dream was too large for a single person to carry. It would overflow, waking them in screams or in silence so deep their voice would not return for days. These dreams spoke of vast floods, of lights in the sky that moved against nature, of ancestors wearing masks made of stars. The person would be led to water or fire or stone and asked to speak to it. Not to explain, but to release. They would whisper to the river, scream into the forest, press their forehead to the cave wall. And slowly the weight would lift. Not fully, but enough. The dream was never just theirs. It was part of something larger, something circular. Stories passed down were often only fragments, endings without beginnings, beginnings without centers. A girl might be told of a snake that carried fire in its belly, and years later she would dream of that fire rising through her own chest. There was no instruction for what to do next. She would simply wake and live differently with a new caution, a new knowing. And so across time, across unmeasured centuries and nights without clocks, the dreaming continued. It shaped migrations and myths, marriages and mysteries. A clan might move not because the weather changed, but because three people all dreamed of a place where the moon touched the sea. They would walk for weeks, trusting only what the night had shown. And when they found it, they would build nothing. Only sleep there together until the dream passed. It was not utopia. There was hunger. There was death. Children vanished into rivers, hunters were taken by snow. But even in grief, the people turned to dreams. They would lie beside the body and ask the dead to visit one last time. Sometimes they did. A father might whisper a word through his daughter's dream, a single syllable that changed how she walked forever. A mother might leave behind the scent of smoke and pine, lingering on her child's skin each morning for weeks. These were the first beliefs, not in gods or laws but in connection, in something that flowed between all things seen clearest in sleep. They believed the world was alive and dreaming was the way it spoke. Not in commands but in symbols. Not in punishments but in possibilities. And those who listened closely enough, those who risked walking deep into the silent forest of the mind, returned with a kind of vision that could not be explained. Only followed, only lived. And still the stars turned. Still the fires cracked and faded. Still the people, generation after generation, lay down and closed their eyes, not to escape the world but to meet it more fully, to let the dream do its ancient work. In time, the dreamers learned that some places held memory deeper than others. Valleys where fog lingered long after sunrise, caves where water dripped with the patience of centuries, hills that hummed beneath the feet. These were known as dream places. Not every traveler could feel them, but those with quiet minds and open hearts sometimes caught the whisper. A child might suddenly freeze wide-eyed and say, "It's like I've already been here." No one dismissed this. They would make camp there. They would dream there. And if something stirred in the night, a scent, a sound, a presence, then they knew they were not alone, that something older than memory was watching. As language slowly evolved and tribes gave names to what once went unnamed, the dreams became stories and the stories became myths. But the dreamers remembered. They remembered that before all myths there was silence. And from silence came the images. They knew that no matter how many tales they told around the fire, no matter how many songs were passed from mother to daughter, the truest things could never quite be said. They could only be dreamed. Even the first artists, those who left ochre spirals and animals on cave walls, were believed to be translating visions seen behind their eyes. They were not painting what was outside, but what was within. Their brushes, made of reed or bone or hair, were dipped into memory itself. When they drew the mammoth, it was not just a creature to hunt. It was a being that had stood beside them in sleep, its breath warm, its eye deep with sorrow. When they painted hands, hundreds of them pressed against stone in shadow, they were not marking territory. They were saying, "We were here. We dreamed. We remember." Some of the earliest burial grounds were chosen not for beauty or safety, but for dreams. A spot where someone dreamed of walking beside the dead and not being afraid was marked, revered. They believed that dream had thinned the veil, that in death one might return to that dream place and find comfort. And so they laid their loved ones there, surrounded by stones and bones and symbols whose meaning has long since faded, but whose purpose remains. A promise to the dreaming. Seasons changed. Tribes wandered. Ice melted. Forests became grasslands, rivers shifted, and still the dreams came. Sometimes they warned. Sometimes they healed. Sometimes they made no sense at all. Laughter wrapped in fog, a bird speaking in riddles, a child carrying a sun in her mouth. But even these were honored, for they knew that meaning was not always immediate. A dream could unfold over years, like a flower growing unseen beneath snow. What seemed like nonsense one night could save a life the next. As the people aged, they grew more silent. Not out of weariness but reverence. The old ones dreamed with less effort, sometimes while still awake. They would sit for hours, eyes closed, lips parted slightly as if listening to music no one else could hear. The young would watch them, puzzled, impatient. But in time they too would grow quiet. They would learn that not every question needed an answer and not every answer needed words. Even conflict, when it arose, was often resolved through dreaming. Two families who disagreed might each choose a sleeper, one from each side, and let them lie beside the same fire. What came in the night would be shared at dawn. If both dreamed of water, they would know the solution required yielding. If both dreamed of fire, they would speak plainly and part for a time. If both dreamed of a child, they would return to the community and seek peace. These dreams were not laws, but they were honored more than any spoken decree. Some said that dreaming was a gift from the moon. Others believed it came from beneath the earth, carried up by roots and stone. Still others thought it came from before time itself, from a place beyond the stars. and that sleep was a kind of remembering, a return to something forgotten only by waking minds. Whatever the source, the result was always the same: a deepening of connection to each other, to the land, to the great mystery that pulsed behind every leaf, every fire, every breath. And through it all, they never lost the habit of listening, not just to each other, but to the wind, to the water, to the silence between heartbeats, because they had learned over lifetimes that dreams do not always shout. Most often they whisper, and only those who are very still and very patient can hear them. Still the fires burned low, still the stars wheeled overhead, still the people lay down night after night and surrendered not to sleep, but to the dreaming, entering the oldest world, the deepest river, the first story ever told. Some began to believe that dreams were not individual at all, but shared, that they rose like mist from the earth and drifted through the camp, touching some more deeply than others. It explained why a child and an elder might dream the same vision on the same night, though they'd never spoken of it. It explained why strangers who had never met could find themselves drawn together by an image: a deer with glowing antlers, a house made of bone, a sky that split open like cloth. These shared dreams became known as the deep threads, rare, powerful, and not to be taken lightly. When they appeared, the people listened. They stopped what they were doing. They sat in circles, and they waited. Time, as measured by sun and moon, moved forward. But the dream time spun in its own rhythm, untouched by seasons. Some dreams lasted only a moment in sleep but stretched like lifetimes in memory. Others recurred for decades, always shifting slightly, like a voice speaking from behind a door that never fully opened. When someone dreamed of their own death, they didn't weep or panic. They sat with it. They told no one for days. Then, when ready, they shared, not to ask for help but to prepare others. It wasn't feared. Death in a dream meant one foot was already in the next world, and such a thing was a privilege. A reminder that the journey never ended, only changed. In those early days, before writing, before even song had full shape, dreams were the first library. A child could carry a dream for years, not understanding its meaning, until the day came when an elder heard it and smiled with recognition. "I dreamed that too long ago," they would say, "but in mine the tree was burning." And from the tension between those two visions, green and flame, came a truth neither had seen alone. They believed this was the purpose of the dreaming: not answers but dialogue, not clarity but connection. Sleep itself was sacred. They prepared for it like a rite. Bodies rubbed with herbs, minds cleared with soft chants. Children were taught not to fear the dark, but to greet it like an old friend. Fires were kept low, not to banish shadows, but to invite them in gently. Beds were not fixed. Some nights on moss, some on sand, some in the crook of a tree, because each place shaped the dream differently. It was known that to sleep beside running water brought dreams of movement, while to sleep beneath heavy branches brought dreams thick with memory. Some claimed to travel in dreams, not just to other places but to other people. They would return and tell of a cousin's injury days before word arrived by mouth. They would speak of distant valleys they'd never seen in waking life, only to walk into them months later. These dream walkers, as they came to be known, were treated with careful respect. Not worshipped, not obeyed, but listened to as one might listen to thunder or birdsong, aware that the message might not be for now but for some time yet to come. Sometimes someone would return from a dream changed, their voice quieter, their gaze deeper. They'd walk differently, as if their feet knew things the rest of them did not. If asked what they'd seen, they might simply say, "I stood in the place before names." No one pressed them for more. They had gone far and returned whole, and that was enough. Over time, these dreamers became the keepers of old paths, not rulers, not priests, but those who remembered what others forgot. They knew the stones that hummed beneath moonlight, the trees that bent slightly toward sleeping bodies, the wind that carried laughter from ancestors long gone. They were not always wise in the way of tools or shelter or harvest, but they could feel when the land was restless. When the dreams grew strange and jagged, they would call for stillness. No hunting, no fire building, only sleep, deep and long until the meaning surfaced. They believed that some dreams didn't come from within at all. They came from the world itself, that the earth too had thoughts and sorrows and longings, and that it whispered them to those who would lie still enough to listen. A dream of fire might mean the forest needed burning. A dream of silence might mean the river was watching. These were not metaphors to them. They were truths as real as hunger. And so they lived, not ruled by dreams but guided by them. Gently, firmly, patiently, as one might follow the scent of rain in the distance, knowing it may come today or next season, but come it would. They did not expect understanding all at once. They knew some dreams took lifetimes to unfold, and they accepted that they would not see every meaning in their own days. They were part of something longer, wider, older than themselves, something vast and sleeping and waking all at once. And still the stars turned. Still the people laid down beneath them, closed their eyes, and let the world speak. Not in words, not in rules, but in images that flickered just behind the lids, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be lived. And as each generation passed into the next, the dreams were carried forward not by books or carvings, but by the slow, steady breath of memory. Children learned to listen before they learned to speak. They were taught to honor silence, not as absence, but as the moment before the dream arrives. Silence, they were told, was the breath the world takes before speaking to you. If you were always making noise, always moving, you would never hear it. And without it, the dreams would fade. Some tribes began to draw symbols in the dirt or with berry dyes on hides, not to write words, but to mark the shape of dreams. A circle meant the cycle. A spiral meant a journey without end. 2 lines crossing meant a choice was coming. These were not taught with instructions but handed down through watching. A grandmother tracing a shape after waking from a heavy sleep. A child mimicking the motion later in play. Meaning passed like smoke, visible for a moment, then gone, but lingering in scent and feeling. In every corner of the ancient world, even where people had never met, these symbols reappeared. Not always the same, not always clear, but familiar in their rhythm. It was as if the dreams were speaking in a shared language, older than any tribe, older than any land, as though the earth itself had written its own alphabet into the hearts of those who walked it. This gave rise to a quiet knowing, a belief that all people, no matter how distant, were tied by dreaming. That even if you had never seen another's face, you had perhaps seen their dream. There were nights when the dreams came sharp and full of warning. Whole villages would wake at once, gasping, eyes wide, skin cold with the same unspoken terror. They would rise without question and leave the place they had called home, journeying to some unknown place. And days or weeks later, when fire or flood or plague came to the spot they had fled, they would speak of the dream not as prophecy but as protection. Not magic, not superstition, just a listening too deep for the waking mind to grasp. And then there were nights when nothing came. No images, no whispers. Only blackness, long and endless. These were the hardest, not for fear but for hunger. The hunger for meaning, for connection, for the reassurance that the world still had something to say. In these times, people would gather close, not to speak of what they saw but of what they missed. They would hum old tunes without melody, chants that made no sense, as if trying to stir the sleeping world awake. They did not fear the silence, but they longed for the return of the voice. The oldest among them believed the dreams lived in everything. Not just in sleep, but in the flight of birds, in the bending of grass, in the way fire cracked. A spark that jumped and landed near your foot meant something. A breeze that shifted the smoke over a certain person meant something else. To them, the entire world was a dreaming body, and every leaf and shadow was part of its mind. To walk through the forest was to walk through the thoughts of the land. To drink from the river was to sip the memory of mountains. They didn't try to prove it. They just lived it. And still, as always, they slept. Not just because the body needed rest, but because the soul needed remembering. Each night was a door, and each dream was a step through that door. They believed this deeply. that to forget how to dream was to lose one's place in the world. Not just as a human but as a part of the great weaving. And so they kept the dream alive, not through effort but through surrender. They didn't chase it. They let it come as it always had and always would. And still somewhere the fire flickers low. A figure stirs beside it, eyes closed, breathing slow. Around them silence hums. Beyond them stars burn like ancient stories. The dream waits, just out of reach, ready to step forward once again. In time, even as tools sharpened and settlements grew, as the wheel turned and fields were cleared, the dreaming never left them. It simply wove itself deeper into life. Farmers would plant based on dreams of rain. Hunters would follow paths seen not in daylight but behind their eyes. Mothers would whisper lullabies not taught by anyone living, but remembered from somewhere that felt older than bone. And when disputes rose, it was not always the strongest or loudest who was asked to lead. It was the one who had dreamed of walking barefoot across snow and feeling no cold. The one who had stood beside a beast and felt no fear. These signs mattered more than lineage. Dreams shaped the shape of power. Stories grew like moss around the dreams. A man who slept beneath the same tree every full moon and returned with songs no one had ever heard before. A girl who could dream others' memories, who knew the names of ancestors never spoken aloud. An old woman who, in her final days, spoke only in images, and yet everyone understood her. These were not seen as miracles, only reminders. That the dream was always near. That the unseen world was just as real as the stone and fire in hand. And then writing came. Slowly and not everywhere at once, the marks grew more fixed. Symbols began to bind meaning too tightly. The fluid language of dreaming did not fit easily into lines and laws. Some rejoiced at the permanence. Others mourned it. They saw that once something was written, it stopped changing, and dreams were nothing if not change. But still they tried. They carved dreams into stone, painted visions on walls. The symbols remained long after the dreamers had passed, though the meanings blurred. Some say all mythology is just fossilized dreaming. Echoes turned into shape. Even as temples rose and empires swelled, even as cities filled the spaces between stars and dirt, there were always those who kept to the edge. The watchers. The quiet ones. They stayed in the dark, just beyond the torchlight, lying down on bare earth each night to listen. They did not preach. They did not record. They only dreamed and remembered and shared when asked. Through plague, through famine, through war, through forgetting, they remained. Dreamkeepers. Not chosen, not special, just willing. And when the world grew loud, so loud that even the stars seemed distant, when machines blinked through the night and rest became a thing to schedule, still in corners of silence the dreaming continued. A child, feverish with unknown longing, saw herself walking on clouds that dripped honey. A man on a train, eyes closed for just a moment, felt himself swimming through the roots of trees. A woman waking at dusk with tears she could not explain, remembering the song of someone she had never met. The dream had never stopped. It had only changed its clothing. Even now it waits. In the spaces between the clicks, the hums, the endless scrolling, it waits. In the moment before sleep claims you. In the way a shadow falls in the corner of your room. In the echo of your own footsteps down a long, quiet hall. The ancient dreaming, the river without source or mouth, still flows. It does not ask you to understand. It only asks you to lie down, to close your eyes, to listen. And remember you do, not always with clarity, not always with joy, but with a strange and aching familiarity, as though you were not learning something new but returning to something half forgotten. Sometimes it comes in flashes. The feeling of cool stone beneath your feet, the scent of ash in a place that no longer burns, the sound of a language that has no words but speaks directly to your bones. You wake not frightened, but filled with the weight of something ancient that refuses to be named. You carry it with you through the day, tucked behind your ribs, a warmth that flickers when no one is watching. There are times when you speak a sentence and have no idea where it came from. Times when a place you've never been feels like home. These are fragments of the old dreaming, still reaching you across time. You are not separate from it. You never were. You are a page in a book that no hand ever wrote, a note in a song that plays without end. When you sleep, you turn the page. When you dream, the story continues. The modern world may press against the edges, insistent and bright, but it cannot drown the dreaming. It only masks it. Beneath glass and steel and signal, the pulse remains. Every human carries the inheritance, whether they know it or not. It lies in the way we create, in the way we yearn, in the way we reach out in the dark for something more. We build stories like we once built fires. Something to gather around, something to protect against the cold mystery of the night. And at the center of each story is a dream, still glowing, still warm. It has always been this way. Even the earliest ancestors who had no word for dream and no word for self, still closed their eyes and entered that other world. They did not separate it from waking life. They did not ask whether it was real. To them, the dream was simply another form of truth. One that arrived quietly and without permission, like the wind, like death, like the stars. They did not try to control it. They only listened, and in listening they became part of something larger than themselves. Today many have forgotten how to listen. Not out of neglect, but out of noise. There is too much. Too many lights. Too many voices. Too many demands. Sleep has become a casualty, a weakness, a thing to delay or conquer. But dreams are not patient. They do not beg for your time. They simply wait, watching, murmuring, rising through the cracks. And when you finally fall still enough, when you surrender to that first deep breath, they return without anger, without judgment. They return like the tide. You may not remember them clearly. You may wake with only an image, a phrase, a feeling. But that is enough. The dream is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a companion to walk beside. And it never truly ends. What your ancestors began when they first slept beneath open sky, you continue every night. Every time you close your eyes and let the world slip away, you return to that place. The place without maps, the place where time folds, where language crumbles and only meaning remains. Somewhere beyond the edge of memory, the first dream still lives. Not as a relic, but as a seed. Waiting for the right heart, the right moment, the right silence to bloom again. Perhaps in your sleep tonight. Perhaps in the dream after that. Or the one after that. Because dreams are not in a hurry. They are eternal. And they remember even when we do not. So lie down. Close your eyes. Let go. The dream will take it from here. And as the dream takes hold, not like a door slamming shut but like mist curling into your lungs, your senses begin to dissolve into something softer. You are no longer where your body sleeps. The weight of your bones disappears. The shape of your face vanishes, and even your name, once so loud in your waking hours, slips quietly beneath the surface. You are still you, but you are also something more. You are the child again before words. You are the elder before death. You are the breath between lives, floating. You walk not on ground but on memory. The terrain shifts beneath you, sometimes resembling the cobblestones of a city you've never visited, other times the soft mud of a riverbank where your bare feet know exactly where to step. The sky is always strange, sometimes purple, sometimes golden, sometimes black without stars, and always watching. Nothing here is static. Doors appear without hinges. Trees hum with voices. Animals speak, not in sentences but in truths. And you do not question it. You have learned, without knowing when or how, that in the dream, meaning comes without. But it simply is. Other travelers pass by. Some bear faces you know but haven't seen in decades. Others are strangers who feel like family. One reaches out and touches your shoulder, and in that single gesture you remember a pain that isn't yours, a joy that never happened. But it feels real. More real sometimes than the ticking world beyond the veil. These fragments build something inside you. You don't know what it is, not exactly. A shape, a sound, a sensation too big for waking language. But it's growing, and you carry it forward each time you return. Somewhere a voice begins to hum. It is not a song but it feels like home. You follow it through forests of shadow and glass, through cities made of sighs and lantern light. The hum becomes a pulse, not just in your ears but in your chest, in the soil, in the sky. It is the same pulse your ancestors followed when they first closed their eyes beneath the open heavens. The same rhythm that beat in the cave dweller's drum, in the lullaby whispered by a Mesopotamian mother, in the chant of a monk falling asleep with wax candles still burning. The dreaming does not belong to you. You belong to it. And just when the dream begins to thin, when the veil grows lighter and the scent of the waking world begins to drift in, something deep within you reaches out, not to hold on but to mark the moment. You do not try to control the dream. You simply witness it. A river flows backwards. A mountain breathes. You turn and see yourself sleeping, distant and small. You feel no fear, only awe. And then it fades. But not all at once. The dream leaves pieces behind, like ash in your hair, like starlight under your nails. You wake, but the taste of it lingers. You walk through your day with the strange knowledge that something vast and beautiful just passed through you. Others won't see it. You won't remember it clearly. But your body knows. Your bones remember. And that is enough. The next night it will come again. Not the same dream but the same current. The same ocean. The same infinite thread woven by those who came before, still stitching its way through you. And whether you sleep beneath a blanket of animal skins, beneath a roof of clay, beneath neon lights, or beneath the endless hum of machines, the dream does not care. It defines you, because it always has, and it always will. And as it finds you once more, it no longer knocks. It simply arrives, as natural as the breath before sleep, as inevitable as the dusk. You don't question how you slipped into it this time. You don't notice the moment your thoughts stopped belonging to you. You are already walking again somewhere that feels both old and unfinished. The air carries weightless voices. Not sounds, not words, but the kind of presence you feel in your chest, like a memory of something that never happened but still aches. You are not alone here. You never are, though you rarely see the others clearly. They move like smoke, like echoes that once had shape. Sometimes they watch. Sometimes they follow. Sometimes they simply pass like wind across the face. One reaches out not with a hand but with a question that fills your lungs without sound. Do you remember before you were born? The answer blooms in you, terrifying and beautiful. Yes. Somehow yes. And in this space between waking and forgetting, time begins to crumble. You stand on stones laid by hands long dead, but the hands are yours. You drink from a cup made of fire and know you have tasted it before. The sky above cracks and spills stars like tears, and you understand that they are not falling, they are returning. Returning to you, to the circle that has no beginning and no edge. You see stories carved into the wind. Not told, not spoken, simply known. A woman dances beneath trees older than language. A child cradles a shadow as if it were a sibling. A city sings itself to sleep every night with voices that have no mouths. None of this startles you. None of it feels wrong. The dream is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be remembered, piece by impossible piece, until your soul carries more than your mind can explain. Somewhere, someone you've never met but have always known takes your hand. Their face flickers like candlelight, sometimes familiar, sometimes blank, always kind. They don't speak. They only walk beside you as you descend into a place beneath the dream beneath the dream, where no light reaches and yet everything is visible, where sound is silent so deep it hums with ancient warmth. This is where the first dreams sleep, buried not in earth, but in memory so old even the stars forget. You step carefully. Every motion here echoes across time. Your breath is wind in a prehistoric sky. Your heartbeat shakes the roots of forgotten mountains. You kneel before a pool not made of water but of all the lives you have not lived. Faces flicker on the surface. Each one a version of you, each one a whisper of what could have been, what still might be. You do not fear them. You recognize them. You are made of them. Above you, the world you left behind grows thin. You hear its hum, streetlights buzzing, clocks ticking, footsteps pacing. But they are faint now. and they do not call you back yet. There is more to see here, more to feel, more to remember. You sit by the pool and close eyes that are already closed, and in that stillness you fall again. Not downward, not upward, but inward, into the part of you that was never born, into the part of you that never forgot. And in falling inward, the dream deepens not in darkness but in clarity, as though you are peeling back the layers of yourself until only essence remains. There is no fear here, only vastness, a kind of silence that is not the absence of sound but the fullness of presence, the kind of silence that hums in ancient caves, in the stillness before a storm, in the breath held between question and answer. You do not float. You do not fall. You exist. Time here is not measured by seconds but by remembering. With each heartbeat something returns to you, fragments long buried. The taste of wind before language. The warmth of a fire lit by hands that no longer exist. The shape of your own soul before it ever had a name. These are not visions. They are not hallucinations. They are truths too large for waking life to contain. You see now that the dream does not come from sleep. It is not a byproduct of biology or a flicker of neurons. It is older than the body, older than thought. It is the original archive, the well from which the first myths were drawn, the sacred theater in which all that has ever lived returns to speak in symbol and fire. In this space memory is shared. You feel the sorrow of a shepherd watching his flock vanish in snow 2,000 years ago. The joy of a mother holding her firstborn beneath stars that no longer shine. The terror of a child hiding from war behind crumbling stones. The awe of a hunter watching the northern lights rise like ghosts. You are them just for a breath. You feel what they felt. You understand without question. This is the communion of dreams, where the veil between self and other becomes thin, and love grows not from knowing but from being. And then something stirs. Not outside you but within. A sound that is not a sound. A recognition. Summons. The dream is shifting again like a tide changing direction. You rise though your body never moves. You are drawn upward, through layers of fog and golden dust and glowing memories that cling to your shoulders like shawls. You pass through the whispering of lost cities, through chants in languages never written, through songs sung by people whose names no longer exist. You emerge onto a plain, endless and open but not empty. Shapes move at the edges, monoliths of thought, towers built from longing, rivers of shared grief and joy flowing silently beside you. Here the dream takes form. Here it offers you something, a vision, a lesson, a truth not in words but in symbol. You see a ladder built from bones and breath, a tree whose roots grow into the stars, a child placing a crown on the head of a beast. Each image pulses with meaning, and though you cannot explain them aloud, you know them. You have always known them. They were stitched into your being long before you ever learned to speak. In this moment you are not observing the dream. You are part of its telling. Your presence changes it. Your breath reshapes its walls. You realize now why the old ones treated dreams with reverence, why they listened so closely, why they built rituals around sleep, around silence, around night. The dream is not a shadow of life. It is life remembering itself. And as the stars above begin to ripple, as if nodding in agreement, you understand that you are not here to solve the dream. You are here to carry it, to keep it alive, to let it pass through you and, in some way you may never understand, leave the world a little fuller, a little softer, a little more awake. And the dream is not over. It never is. You move forward though there is no ground. Forward through sensation, through memory, through the delicate scaffolding of thought and forgetting. The stars overhead begin to speak again, not in language but in rhythm. They flicker in patterns that bypass your ears and embed themselves directly into the marrow of your being. You don't need to understand. You only need to listen. Somewhere in the shifting distance, You see a figure seated by a fire that burns with no fuel. Their back is to you, yet you know them. Not from this life, not even from any single dream, but from the timeless place where all spirits pass each other like ships in fog. As you approach, they do not turn. Instead, they offer you something cupped in both hands. You cannot see it, but you feel it before it touches your own palms, weightless and ancient, humming with the same vibration as your own breath. When your hands close around it, it vanishes, but not into nothing. It disappears into you. You do not know what you've been given, only that you will carry it back into the waking world, like an ember kept alive through a cold night. The fire flickers once more and then fades, and the figure, still silent, begins to dissolve into the air as though they were never separate from it at all. Now the dream begins to change again. You don't walk anymore. You drift as if thought itself were the current. Scenes ripple outward in all directions like petals on water. Each one a life, a story, a moment. You watch a Stone Age father teaching his son to tie sinew to a flint-tipped spear. You see a woman alone in a medieval tower, writing down words no one will read for centuries. You feel the quiet despair of a sailor looking up at unfamiliar stars, praying for home. You sense the trembling excitement of the first human to ever look at a shadow on the wall and imagine a god behind it. You begin to realize that this place, this current of dreaming, is made of all of us. Every soul that has ever lived, every fear, every wish, every song half whispered in the dark. It's not just memory, it's a living archive, a breathing ocean of what it has meant and still means to be human. The deeper you go, the less separate you feel. You no longer say, "I see." You say, "We remember." You no longer ask questions. You simply witness. A billion fragments of love, loss, discovery, awe, and wonder, all spiraling and looping and folding around each other in infinite dances. None of it belongs to you, and yet all of it does. Far in the distance, or maybe just outside yourself, you sense the edge of the dream. Not an end, but a thinning, a place where the world you left behind begins to glow faintly like dawn on the horizon. But the dream does not push you back. It lets you linger, because you are not finished here. Something waits for you just beyond the veil of images. A last place, a last understanding, and you drift toward it slowly, reverently, like a pilgrim reaching the sacred grounds at the heart of all mystery. The dream grows quiet, but not empty. The quiet is dense, alive, vibrating with the breath of all who've passed through this place before you. It does not press against you but wraps around you like warmth from a sun you can't see. You are not floating now. You are suspended as if held in a cupped hand the size of the cosmos. Nothing stirs, and yet everything watches. You are seen not by eyes but by time itself. In that stillness, you begin to feel something long forgotten awaken within you. A presence older than your thoughts. A memory not of events, but of being, of existing before definition. It is the you that existed before time, before form, before even sleep. The part of you that remembers not just this life, but all the ones that came before. The you that has always known that dreams are not illusions, but the very language of eternity speaking back to itself. A single light appears. Small, flickering like the last star after dawn. It hovers not ahead or above, but inside. And then you see it more clearly, not a light but a door. Not made of wood or stone, but of pure knowing. It does not ask to be opened. It simply is. You do not reach for it with hands. You reach with acceptance. The door unfolds. And through it comes not brightness, not darkness, but understanding. It pours through you not like water but like recognition. It does not speak in words but in patterns that unfold in your thoughts like roots under thawed earth. You see the shapes of forgotten dreams from long ago, ones you thought were lost. The laughter of someone who once held you. The final heartbeat of someone you once let go. The look in the eyes of someone you never met but somehow knew. And more than anything, you feel the thread. That golden, unbreakable thread that runs from the first dreamer to the last. The one that wove the stories of the cave painter and the skywatcher and the stargazer and the one who first learned to whisper a lullaby. You feel it run through your chest, through your breath, through your sleep-heavy limbs. And it binds you not like a rope, but like a song, soft, constant, carrying your story home. You do not know how long you stay there. There is no time here, no measure. Only that thread and the hum of all that has ever dreamed. And slowly, the shape of the waking world begins to call to you, not with urgency but with inevitability. A breeze moves through the quiet. Your name, not spoken but sensed, begins to gather itself from the mist. You are not being pulled away. You are being led back. Not out of the dream but forward with it. Because now, even as the colors shift and the air begins to thin, you realize you are not leaving this place behind. You are carrying it with you. It nestles quietly beneath your waking thoughts, like a rhythm you can't hum but still move to. The dream folds into the fabric of your being, invisible but persistent, like the scent of rain on dry earth or the taste of a memory you've never lived. You begin to rise, not as from sleep but as from deep water, where every movement feels slow and sacred, like surfacing from another world with breath that remembers what it was like to belong to the sea. The pull of the waking world is gentle now, a steady heartbeat drawing you closer to the edges of this place. Around you, the dream does not fade. It retreats not in fear or loss, but in reverence, like a temple closing its doors behind you with the quiet understanding that you will return. They always do, the ones who see, the ones who remember. As you cross the final veil, you carry more than impressions. You carry the raw pulse of understanding. You see things differently now, not with your eyes but with the space behind them. The waking world, when it arrives again, will be less solid than you remember. Walls will look less permanent. Time will feel less linear. Words will struggle to describe what you've touched. You'll try anyway, and that will be enough. You sense even now the others. The ones walking their own roads in this dreamscape. Some behind you, some ahead. You will never meet most of them. But their breath touches yours in that sacred dark. And their dreams are braided with your own in the invisible weave of collective remembering. You are not alone. You were never alone. As your senses begin to reacquaint themselves with the weight of gravity and the sound of the waking room, you feel the dream curl gently into the corners of your mind like smoke, like silk, like an unfinished melody. Not gone, never gone. Just quieter. Waiting. And as your body rests and your breath returns to its rhythm, you understand now what the dream was telling you all along. Not in grand symbols or whispered prophecies, but in stillness. Being. In that vast and secret knowing that before time, before history, before even sleep itself, we were already dreaming. And now that dream lives in you, not as a memory but as a presence. It lingers beneath your thoughts like roots beneath the soil, silent but alive. As you blink back into the world of forms and names and clocks and footsteps, something has shifted. The light is no longer just light. The shadows hold meaning. The wind speaks in symbols, and silence feels less like absence and more like an invitation. You walk now through a world that feels at once familiar and completely transformed. Each moment echoes faintly with the dream's voice, a soft resonance behind your heartbeat. You notice things others pass by, the patterns in cracked stone, the rhythm in a stranger's cough, the stories sleeping in abandoned buildings. Not because the world has changed, but because your eyes have. Every breath you take is stitched with what you saw. Not just in image, but in essence. You've carried back the ache of 1,000 ancient goodbyes, the joy of distant births, the warmth of hands that held fire and memory in equal measure. You see these truths in the smallest things. A thread on a sleeve, the pause in someone's sentence, the way dusk turns the sky into an altar. The waking world is louder, yes, faster, but it no longer drowns you, because now, deep beneath its surface noise, you can hear the hum of the eternal, the lullaby of dream, still playing, still pulsing, guiding you softly back toward it with every sigh of wind, every flicker of candlelight, every sleep-heavy blink. And one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you will feel it again. That gentle pulling, that slow descent into the realm without walls. You will return to that place of shared remembering, to that ocean of all who have come before and all who will follow. And you will slip into it not like a visitor but like a returning traveler. Because the dream does not forget. And neither will you. There will come a moment, not marked by time or calendar, when you'll feel the air shift again just slightly. You'll be sitting still or walking beneath trees or lying down in the hush between midnight and morning, and suddenly the world around you will soften. The angles of your room, the edges of sound, the pressure of gravity, all will grow quiet. You won't know why and you won't need to. That will be the dream calling you back. You'll close your eyes not to escape but to arrive. And without effort, you'll find yourself descending once more. Not falling, not flying, but sinking as a feather does, with grace and certainty. The dream does not demand anything from you. It only opens. It receives. And you will step into it again not as a guest but as a thread returning to the loom. This time perhaps you'll dream of a stone hall with walls that breathe. Or a fire-lit cave where shadows act out the stories of people long gone. You may meet faces you've never seen but somehow know, speaking languages you don't understand but feel like lullabies in your chest. You might walk through a marketplace where every object for sale holds a memory you once lived. Or sit beside a still lake, beneath a sky so ancient it remembers the very first dream ever dreamed. The dream will show you more, not because it is endless, though it might be, but because it waits for you to be ready. What it offers cannot be rushed, cannot be grasped. It can only be witnessed, and in that witnessing you are changed. Each journey layers upon the last, not as bricks, but as veils. Each one thinner, each one drawing you closer to something for which there are no names. And when you return again back to waking, the world will feel a little more sacred. Not cleaner, not kinder, not yet, but more meaningful. You will move through it like a historian of forgotten realms, seeing ancient truths stitched into the bark of trees, hearing lost songs in the murmur of rivers. You'll carry a silence in you that no noise can shake. A stillness at the center of your being, where the dream waits and watches and remembers. Because you are now part of its story. You always were. And though your days may seem ordinary to those around you, though the routine of life continues with its steady pulse, voices, errands, glowing screens, and clock hands inching forward, you will know that something within you listens from a deeper place. A place untouched by the weather of hours. You may speak the same words, but they will carry more weight. You may look at the same faces, but you will see the stories behind their eyes. The dream doesn't change what you are. It reminds you of what you've always been. There will be nights when sleep comes easily and the passage back into that sacred realm feels like a slow drift into warmth. Other nights it may evade you, staying just out of reach, like the memory of a scent that disappears the moment you try to chase it. But even then, even in sleeplessness, the dream walks beside you. It leaves its traces in the corners of your vision, in the shiver of a phrase overheard, in the sudden quiet that follows a storm. It is not confined to sleep. It lives in the folds of waking life too if you've learned how to look. You might find yourself drawn to ancient places, stone circles, ruins buried in moss, quiet museums where forgotten objects rest under glass like sleeping seeds. Not because they are beautiful, but because they hum, because they echo with the same frequencies you now carry. You will sense that time is not a straight line but a spiral, and that your presence in this moment is also a touch on the past. That when you stand still and listen, you are standing with others who once stood just the same. All across time, beneath the same sky. You may begin to dream not only when your eyes close, but while walking, while reading, while stirring a pot or sitting alone. Small slips into that deeper stream. Images that rise unbidden, feelings that do not belong to now but arrive anyway. You'll no longer fear them. You'll welcome them. For they are proof that the boundary between worlds is thin, and you are one of the few who have remembered how to pass through it. And the dream will never cease to welcome you. It waits in patience beyond the veil of routine, humming like a hearth that never goes cold. It needs nothing from you but your attention. And when you give it, even briefly, It floods you with the weight of stories older than fire, older than speech. You may hear the voice of a child who never grew old. You may stand beside a river that has forgotten its own name. You may look into a mirror and see a dozen lifetimes gazing back. And still the dream continues. Not behind you, not ahead, but through you. You are no longer a visitor. You are part of the map. And in being part of the map, you come to understand that every moment, waking or dreaming, is a footstep across a land far older than time itself. You begin to feel the pulse of the dream not only in quiet hours, but even in the busiest noise of day. It becomes a current beneath your choices, a thread that gently pulls you toward meaning in places others overlook. You feel it in the eyes of a stranger who pauses just before speaking, in the crack of thunder over ancient trees, in the way a child stares too long at a flame, as if remembering something that language cannot hold. You become a keeper of echoes. The things people forget you remember. The fragments left behind in the churn of years cling to you now. An old tune hummed in an alleyway, the way dust moves in sunlight, the taste of water from a clay jar. They're not your memories, not exactly, but they find shelter in you, and through them, you carry forward what would otherwise vanish. You begin to speak less, not because there's nothing to say, but because so much cannot be said. It can only be felt, shared in silence, carried in presence. The dream deepens each time you return to it. It doesn't grow brighter or louder. It grows truer. And you begin to wonder if all of life is a long sleepwalk through the layers of forgetting, until finally we dream deeply enough to remember who we were before we were born. You no longer fear death the way you once did. You see it now not as an end, but as another threshold. Another door. The dream has shown you that time does not end, it loops, it weaves. And we are the pattern, not the weaver. Sometimes you will ache for the dream in a way that feels like homesickness. You'll long for that place of velvet darkness, where every thought glows like a lantern and where each step takes you deeper into memory, into self, into the vastness of all who ever were. But you will learn not to chase it. You'll let it come as it always has, in its own rhythm, like tides returning to shore. And when it does, you will sink into it again without resistance, not as someone seeking answers, but as someone remembering how to listen. And the dream, infinite and patient, will open once more. It will take your hand not to guide you, but to remind you that you have never been lost. It will show you visions of lives you may yet live and ones you already have. You will walk through cities that only exist at the edge of sleep, where the buildings hum with forgotten languages. You will pass trees that bend to whisper your name in a tongue no living creature speaks. You will sit by fires tended by hands long gone and still warm. You'll find no kings there, no prophets, no gods shouting commands. Only the quiet murmurs of shared existence, the gentle truth that we are made of the same sleep, the same breath, the same stardust woven into story after story. And as you move through that world, you'll understand that you are not dreaming alone. Every soul that dreams adds their thread to the weave. The shape of that great tapestry shifts with every slumbering sigh. You will not want to leave, but when you must, the dream will not close behind you. It will tuck itself into your breath, your spine, your shadow. You will wake not as someone who slept, but as someone who traveled. And though your bed may creak, your room may be dim, your heart will thrum with the echo of ancient stars, and your eyes will carry the softness of one who remembers the way home. And as you walk once more through the waking world, something subtle will follow you. Not a ghost, not a vision, but a presence, woven into the seams of your awareness. You will no longer see the dream and reality as separate countries with gates between them, but as a single fabric, thin in some places, translucent in others, stitched by silence and breath and memory. You'll begin to notice how people speak without knowing why, how gestures repeat through generations, how the same fears and hungers have circled us since the first fire was lit. You'll see the dream inside them too, even if they cannot yet. And sometimes, when you pass through crowded streets or sit quietly among strangers, you'll feel the thrum of shared dreaming under their feet. A rhythm older than speech, pulsing through stone and smoke. whispering of old roads walked by those who no longer have names but whose footsteps still echo in the soles of our shoes. You'll feel a strange peace in that awareness, as though even in the chaos and noise and forgetting, something sacred persists. Something watches through us all. You may start to hear words in your own voice that feel borrowed from elsewhere, thoughts that drift up like leaves on a still pond, uninvited but true. You will follow them. You will write them, speak them, dream them again, and wonder how long they've been waiting for someone like you to notice. And even when no one else hears them, even when the world rushes by too quickly to care, you will know they mattered. Because they came from that place where the dream lives, where all things are seen and all things are known. The dream will not always feel gentle. There will be nights when it shows you sorrow, grief not only your own, but of whole civilizations lost beneath waves of time. You may stand in cities buried in sand, hear songs sung by mouths turned to dust, feel the ache of hands that built temples now crumbled to whispers. And in those moments your heart will stretch. It will crack. Not from pain but from expansion. Because even in the ruin there is beauty. Even in the end there is meaning. The dream remembers all, even what the world has tried to forget. And when you awaken from those dreams, you will carry not despair but reverence. You will look at ruins differently, not as broken places but as silent teachers. You will listen to old songs not with your ears, but with the marrow of your bones. You will hold artifacts, even the most ordinary ones, as if they were vessels for memory, because they are. And you will begin to live not only for yourself, but for all those who dreamed before you, for all those still dreaming within you. Over time the line between then and now will blur. A candle flame will call up the image of a fire from 10,000 years ago. A stranger's gesture will mirror one from a face you saw in a dream. You'll begin to suspect that the dream is not something that happens to you, but through you. That your soul is not only yours but a braid of many. That every night you close your eyes, you return not to fantasy but to the deep archive of human memory, where we are all still there, sleeping, waking, loving, mourning, beginning again. And that knowing will never leave you. You will carry that knowing like a quiet ember inside your chest, warm but never burning, steady but never flickering out. It will glow in moments when the world grows too loud, when the pace of everything threatens to pull you under. You'll return to it without needing to try. It will be there in the pause between heartbeats, in the hush that comes just before the dawn breaks, in the stillness of snow falling through lamplight. In those moments you'll feel the weight of all the people who came before you, not as a burden but as a chorus. Not watching but walking with you step for step. You'll stop asking where the dream ends and the world begins. The division will become meaningless. You'll start to feel as if every act, pouring water, tying laces, glancing up at the sky, is part of the story being dreamed into existence. There will be times you forget this. Times when the dull ache of modern life draws your gaze downward. Times when lights are too bright and voices too sharp and everything feels mechanical and hollow. But even then, even in weariness or numbness, you'll sense the dream watching through your eyes, patient and unchanging. And when you sleep again, when you return to that boundless dark filled with gentle voices and impossible places, you'll pick up where you left off. Not because time works there as it does here, but because the dream remembers you. It always will. You may return to a doorway you never stepped through, to a field you once walked in a body you no longer wear. You might meet someone who speaks your name like a secret and tells you they've been waiting since the last time. You won't know when that was. It doesn't matter. Each time you come back you'll go deeper. The dream trusts you now. It opens more slowly, more deliberately, offering you glimpses of truths you might not have understood before. Not as facts, but as symbols, as moods, as colors that feel like memories. A staircase with no top. A bell that rings in absolute silence. A handprint in stone that fits yours perfectly. You begin to realize that the dream isn't teaching you, it's letting you remember. And in remembering, your waking life shifts. You begin to speak differently. Not always out loud, but within yourself. You ask different questions. Not how to succeed, but how to witness. Not what the world owes you, but what you've been given without ever asking. You begin to walk as if others walk through you, as if your skin contains not one voice but hundreds, each whispering softly, each adding to the great chord that hums beneath all things. You may find yourself returning to places you've never been, a forest that feels like home, a shoreline that stirs grief and joy in equal parts, a street you swear you've walked in another life. You'll stand there and listen. You won't always understand what you're hearing, but the dream will stir inside you and say, this is part of you. This too belongs. And eventually you'll stop needing to explain any of it. You'll stop trying to prove the dream to others. You'll see it working in their lives too, even if they don't yet have the language for it. You'll offer them silence, a glance, a word carefully chosen, and that will be enough. Because you will have learned that the dream does not move with speed or logic. It moves with meaning. It chooses those who choose to notice. It calls not with answers but with echoes. And you, sleepless wanderer, will keep listening. There will come a time when you no longer anticipate the dream but live within its rhythm, whether your eyes are open or shut. The flicker of candlelight will seem like a distant signal, a message from a time when language had not yet been carved into stone, when people still understood that fire could speak. You'll begin to feel that time is not a river running in one direction, but a circle turning endlessly. And within that circle you'll see yourself again and again, child, elder, stranger, seer, each version watching the others through thin veils of sleep. You may walk through a forest and hear no bird song, but feel surrounded nonetheless, by presences not ghosts but memory itself lingering in bark and soil. Every root beneath your feet may seem like the edge of something vast and hidden, a record of lives curled into darkness. You might pause beneath a tree that looks ordinary to any passerby but feel your knees tremble, your breath slow, because something inside you recognizes it, not just as a tree but as a threshold. You'll remember how your ancestors spoke to trees not out of superstition but out of respect. They knew what waited in stillness. They knew that some silences hold entire histories. And in the city where stone has replaced soil and light never truly fades, the dream will find you still. Reflected in dark windows, passed in fragments of overheard conversations, humming beneath the hum of electricity. You'll see the old world poking through, an archway too curved for modern logic, a name on a sign that once belonged to a river, a gargoyle staring down from a rooftop no one ever notices. You will be reminded again and again that the past is never buried, only sleeping lightly beneath the noise. When you lay your head down to rest, it will not be for escape but for return. And the return will not always be gentle. Some nights will be flooded with emotion too vast to name. You may dream you are a mother mourning a child lost to war you never lived. You may weep for a city you have never seen. You may wake and feel heavy with sorrow and not know why. But even then you will sense the shape of something sacred underneath it all. The dream will never break you. It will simply open you wide enough to hold more than one life. Other nights you may dream of joy so simple it undoes you. Laughter shared across a fire with those who speak no known language. The feeling of rain on your face in a place where rain is a blessing. The brush of a hand on your shoulder that says, I see you, I remember you, without any words at all. You will wake from those dreams as if touched by something holy. Not chosen, nothing so grand as that, but acknowledged, welcomed. And you will begin to write things down, not to explain but to remember. Not for an audience but for the silence. You may fill notebooks with symbols you cannot decipher, with stories that arrive fully formed but never happened. You may begin to speak aloud to the night sky, to stones, to the wind. Not because you expect answers, but because something deep within you remembers a time when everything could answer, when every element of the world was part of one great conversation. You will no longer fear stillness. In fact, you will crave it. Not because it is empty, but because it is full. You will sit for hours, unmoving, not meditating, not sleeping, just listening. And in that listening something will shift. A veil will part. And you may hear the dream as it truly is. Not a place you visit, but a song you've always been singing without knowing. A song older than your name, older than your breath, and still carrying your voice. There will come a night when you no longer realize you've entered the dream because it will feel exactly like waking. The ground beneath your feet will feel solid, but your steps will leave no trace. The sky will shift its color not with time but with thought. You will walk through places you've never known, yet every stone and shadow will greet you like a returning traveler. You may pass people who do not speak, yet their eyes will fill you with whole conversations. You will understand that you are not dreaming alone. The dream is shared, always has been. And there, perhaps under the light of twin moons or beside a river that reflects the stars too clearly, you will meet someone you cannot name. They may look like someone you once loved or someone from a story you were told as a child. Their face will shift like smoke, but their presence will be unmistakable. They will not ask you questions. They will not give you answers. They will simply stand with you and let the silence stretch as if waiting for you to remember something. Something very old. Something only the deepest part of you has ever known. You won't remember the moment it returns to you, only that suddenly you are breathing differently, standing differently, as if you've stepped back into a shape you forgot was yours. You will feel tears well without sadness, joy without reason, grief without loss. You will look at your hands and see not fingers but instruments, of building, of holding, of remembering. You will understand that your body is not just yours, but a vessel for time, for lineage, for everything that refused to be forgotten. And in that moment the dream may give you a gift. It will not be gold or prophecy or power. It may be a feather, a whisper, a name you've never heard but somehow belongs to you. You will not know what to do with it, at least not then. You will carry it back with you when you wake, tucked somewhere behind your heart, and only much later will you realize what it meant. Because from that point on, things will feel different. Not louder or brighter, but deeper. You'll begin to see the dream in waking life without needing to close your eyes. The pause before someone speaks will feel meaningful. A gust of wind will sound like a voice trying to return. You'll watch a child stare at nothing and understand they are not imagining, but seeing what we've learned to ignore. And you'll know without doubt that the dream never left us. We only stopped listening. You'll see it in rituals you once thought mundane. Tea poured slowly, a candle lit in silence, a door opened just before someone knocks. You'll feel it in your spine when walking alone in nature, when the wind moves through trees and it feels not like chance but communication. You'll find it in music that sounds ancient though it was written yesterday, in art that makes your chest ache though it shows nothing you recognize. These are echoes. These are signs. The dream still breathes through us all. And one night not far from now, you'll lie down to rest and feel the boundary blur completely. You won't know if what you see behind your eyes is a memory or a vision. You won't care. You'll welcome it like an old friend, and this time the dream will show you not who you were or what you've forgotten, but who you are becoming. It will show you the road ahead, not in certainty but in feeling. You'll see yourself walking not alone, but surrounded by those who walk within you. Those whose bones became mountains, whose voices became rivers, whose dreams became the very ground you now tread. And when morning comes, you will rise, not as someone who slept, but as someone who returned. Returned from that deep river of shared memory, from that place beyond place, carrying not just a story but the weightless hush of knowing. You will walk into the world a little quieter, a little slower, and others may not know why, but some part of them will feel it. And without knowing why, they may grow quiet too. They may listen. They may even begin to dream again. And as more people begin to dream again, not with the shallow dreams of passing sleep but with the ancient, layered dreams of remembering, the world around you will begin to shimmer at the edges. Not with magic but with meaning. Streets you've walked 1,000 times will seem freshly laid, as if each stone is humming softly, awaiting your steps. A market, a station, a forgotten alleyway, these will become sacred passages, places where the veil thins and the dream peeks through. And you will learn to walk differently through them, with reverence, not because anyone told you to, but because you'll feel the old eyes watching kindly from behind time. Sometimes you will speak to others and know, in the way one knows the shape of their own breath, that they have seen it too. They won't say the word dream. They might not say anything at all. But in the space between your words, something will pass between you, a flicker of shared origin, like embers passed hand to hand in the cold. You will not need to explain. You will only need to listen. And when they speak, if they do, it will be with the voice of someone who has stood in the same timeless wind and known for a moment what it is to remember without memory. You will begin to understand why your ancestors marked the seasons with stones and fire, why they painted symbols in caves and sang to the stars. They were not primitive. They were precise. They knew what we forgot. That time is a spiral, not a line. That sleep is not escape, but return. That silence is not absence, but presence waiting to be heard. You will feel this in your marrow and wonder how you ever lived without knowing it. And slowly, gently, you will start to live in rhythm again, not with clocks, but with tides and shadows and birdsong. And on some future night, perhaps when you are old, or perhaps tomorrow, you will lie down and feel no fear of closing your eyes. Because by then the dream will not be a place you visit. It will be a place you belong. A place that has waited for you through countless lifetimes and will wait again if you forget. It always waits. You will feel the others there. Those who never stopped dreaming, those who walked beside you even when unseen, those whose stories you carried unknowingly in your blood. They will be there not to greet you but to welcome you back to yourself. And in that moment, standing at the threshold of waking and dreaming, of remembering and becoming, you will understand that all along, this was never a journey through time or sleep or even history. It was a journey home. Home to the story beneath all stories, the voice beneath all voices, the dream that never sleeps but lives quietly in each of us, waiting, listening, ready to open its arms the moment we remember how to listen and return. And so the dream draws itself not to a close, but to a breathless pause, a stillness so full it hums with memory. You carry it now not as a tale retold, but as a living echo folded quietly inside you like the last ember of a sacred fire. The path you walked through sleep and silence and memory was never meant to end, only to remind you that even in this waking world, under artificial stars and ticking clocks, you are not alone. The ancestors walk with you, the old world watches through your eyes, and the dream breathes through every quiet moment you allow to remain untouched. Nothing is lost. It only waits. And now you remember.